The fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing shadows across the log walls of the main room. Outside December, snow fell soft and silent over the Montana landscape. Inside, an old man sat in his chair, the leather worn smooth by 40 years of use. His hands, gnarled and weathered, rested on his knees. His eyes, still sharp despite 75 winters, watched the boy across from him. Samuel Brooks was 9, all elbows and earnest questions. He held an old photograph, its edges soft with age. The image showed a young couple standing before a cabin. The man stood tall and solemn. The woman beside him was striking her hand, resting lightly on his arm. "Tell me about grandmother," Samuel said. Ethan Brooks smiled, the expression crinkling the deep lines around his eyes. "What do you want to know? How did she come here? Why did she marry you?" The boy looked at the photograph again. "She was so beautiful. She could have married anyone." "She could have," Ethan agreed. "But she chose me, and I chose her, though neither of us knew what we were choosing that day." Samuel leaned forward. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. "Do you know where your grandmother came from?" Ethan asked. "Boston. But why did she leave?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory. "It was 1878. I was 34 years old. I had just buried my younger brother. This ranch, these 1,500 acres you will inherit one day, was then only 300 acres. And I was dying. Not from sickness, from loneliness." He paused, reaching for his coffee cup. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Your grandmother did not come here looking for love. She came here running from death. And somehow in this hard land we found life together. But to understand that, you need to hear the whole story, from the beginning." The old man settled back in his chair. The firelight played across his face. And he began. February 1878 arrived cold and bitter across the Montana Territory. The land lay frozen under a sky the color of old iron. Ethan Brooks stood at the window of his cabin watching dawn break over the Beartooth Mountains. The light came slow and reluctant, as if even the sun hesitated to face another day. The cabin was small, 2 bedrooms, a main room, a kitchen barely worthy of the name. His father and brother had built it in 1869, cutting the logs themselves, fitting each one with care. Now his father was 8 years gone, his brother 3. Ethan was alone. The Brooks Ranch spread across 300 acres of grazing land in Big Sky country. 87 head of Hereford cattle grazed the winter pasture. 12 quarter horses stood in the barn. The land was good. The water ran clean from the creek. A man could build a life here. Ethan had tried. He pulled on his coat and stepped into the cold. His breath clouded white in the still air. The barn waited across the yard, solid and dark against the snow. Inside, the horses shifted in their stalls. Their breath steamed. The smell of hay and manure and animal warmth wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. He fed them methodically. Hay grain, fresh water from the pump. The well was 40 feet deep, the water cold and pure. His father had dug it by hand. Ethan remembered holding the rope, lowering buckets, hauling up dirt and rock. He had been 12. Connor had been 8. Connor. Ethan closed his eyes against the memory, but it came anyway, as it always did. They said his brother died of fever. The town believed it. The Reverend had spoken kind words over the grave. They buried Connor in the churchyard in consecrated ground among the other good people of Birch Creek. It was a lie. Connor had not died of fever. He had died of war. Not the one that ended in 1865, but the one that continued in his head, in his nightmares, in the screams that woke him every night until he could not bear to sleep at all. March 18th, 75. Ethan had found his brother in the barn. The Winchester rifle lay beside him. The note was clutched in Connor's hand, the paper stained with powder residue and blood. Ethan. The note read, "Do not blame yourself. Some souls cannot come home. I saw things. I did things. I cannot live with them anymore. Tell Mother I am sorry. Tell her I loved her. Forgive me." Connor had been 22 years old. Ethan had burned the note in the stove. He told everyone his brother had taken ill with fever, that he had died in the night despite all efforts to save him. The doctor, old Henderson, had looked at Ethan with knowing eyes, but said nothing. In the Montana Territory of 1875, suicide was still considered a crime, a sin. Those who took their own lives could not be buried in hallowed ground. Their property could be seized. Ethan would not let his brother's memory be so dishonored. But the guilt remained. It ate at him slowly, steadily, like water wearing away stone. Connor had needed help. Ethan had not known how to give it, or perhaps he had been too afraid to try. He had survived the war. Why could Connor not do the same? Now Ethan understood. Survival was not the same for everyone. Some men came home from war missing limbs. Others came home missing pieces of their souls. Connor had served at Gettysburg. He had been 18 years old, barely old enough to grow a proper beard. He came home 3 years later, quiet and hollow-eyed. He would wake screaming. He drank too much. He could not hold a job in town. The only place he found peace was on the ranch working with the horses. But even that peace had not been enough. Ethan finished with the horses and stepped back into the cold. The sun had risen higher now, pale and distant. He looked across his land. 300 acres, good grazing, a herd that would bring decent money come spring, a house that kept out the wind, everything a man needed. Except he was alone. He had tried hiring ranch hands. They came and went. The work was hard, the isolation harder. He tried going to town, to the dances, to the socials at the church. The women looked at him and saw a man too quiet, too haunted, too set in his ways. He was 34 years old. He would die alone on this land. And when he died, what would happen to the ranch? To the legacy his father had built. According to the Homestead Act of 1862, a man had to actively work his claim to keep it. If Ethan died without an heir, the land would revert to the territory. Or worse, it would be bought up by men like Thomas Garrett. Garrett owned the spread to the east, 1,200 acres, 40 hired hands, money that came from somewhere back east, investments and inheritance and schemes Ethan did not understand. Garrett wanted the Brooks land. He had made offers, increasingly generous offers. Ethan always refused. But if he died without an heir, Garrett would have the land anyway. That was when Ethan made his decision. It came to him not in a moment of inspiration, but slowly like water filling a well. He needed a wife, not for love. Love was a luxury he could not afford. He needed a wife for survival, for legacy, for someone to carry on when he was gone. In November of 1877, he placed an advertisement in the Helena Weekly Herald. Rancher, 34 years old, Montana Territory, seeking practical woman capable of enduring hard work and isolation. Land, 300 acres, cattle and horses. No promises beyond honest work and a roof overhead. 3 letters arrived in response. The first was from a woman in St. Louis. Her letter spoke of romance and destiny and the sacred bond of marriage. She wanted a husband who would cherish her, protect her, give her a life of comfort and ease. Ethan read it once and burned it in the stove. The second was from a widow in Denver. Her letter was cold, businesslike. She outlined her expectations: a house in town, help with the work, a clear division of labor and property. If Ethan died, half the ranch would be hers. She signed her name without warmth or feeling. Ethan set that letter aside. The third letter came from Boston, Massachusetts. It was written in a clear, educated hand. The paper was good quality, but not extravagant. The writer's name was Claire Ashford. I am not seeking romance, Mr. Brooks. I am seeking an honest life where my past cannot follow me. I grew up on a horse farm. I know hard work. I know silence. I know how to respect the things that cannot be spoken. If you need a partner who will work beside you and ask for nothing more than fairness and shelter, then I am willing to come to Montana. Something in that letter stopped him, the honesty of it, the lack of pretense. She was not promising to love him. She was promising to work, to endure, to build something together, even if that something was not romantic or beautiful or easy. He wrote back. He sent $47 for travel, 3 months' wages for a cowhand spent on a woman he had never met. For 8 weeks he tried not to think about her. He worked the ranch. He fed the cattle. He mended fences. He lay awake at night wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. And then came the 15th of February, 1878. The stage was due at Birch Creek Station at 3 in the afternoon. Ethan arrived at 2. The platform was empty except for the station master and a few men loading freight. The sky pressed down low and gray. The wind came hard from the northwest, carrying the smell of snow. Ethan stood with his hands in his coat pockets. His Winchester rifle leaned against the wall behind him. In his inside pocket, folded carefully, was the marriage contract Reverend Mitchell had drawn up. Legal and binding, protection for both parties. He told himself this was practical, necessary, the right thing to do. But his hands shook. The nightmare had come again last night. It always did when he was afraid. In the dream he was back at Antietam, the cornfield, the smoke so thick he could barely see. The rebel boy coming at him through the stock's musket raised. Ethan had fired first. The boy went down. Ethan had found him later after the fighting moved on. The boy was still alive, gut shot, dying slow. He could not have been more than 16. He cried for his mother. He cried for water. Ethan stayed with him until the end. He listened as the boy spoke about his home in Georgia, his sisters, his dog. It took 4 hours for him to die. In the nightmare, the boy had Connor's face. Ethan shook his head, trying to clear the memory. He heard the stage before he saw it, the rumble of wheels, the jingle of harness, the driver's shout. The coach came around the bend, trailing dust even in the cold air. The horses pulled up hard. The driver set the brake. 2 men climbed down from the top. Passengers began to emerge. A merchant Ethan recognized from town, a traveling salesman, a young couple newlyweds by the look of them, holding hands and smiling. And then she stepped down. Ethan's heart stopped. The woman who descended from that stage did not look like a practical ranch wife. She looked like someone who belonged in a fine drawing room, not on a frontier platform with mud and wind. She was tall, perhaps 5 feet 8 inches. Auburn hair showed beneath her bonnet. Her face was elegant high cheekbones and a strong jaw. Her eyes were green, striking even in the gray light. She wore a traveling dress, brown and practical, but it fit her well. She moved with confidence, stepping down without assistance, one hand holding the rail, the other carrying a carpet bag. This could not be his bride. A mistake must have been made. Women like this did not come to Montana to marry ranchers with dirt under their nails. But she walked straight toward him. Her eyes met his. She stopped 3 feet away. "You must be Ethan Brooks." Her voice was clear, educated. The accent of Boston still colored her words. Ethan pulled off his hat. "Yes, ma'am. I am Ethan Brooks. Claire Ashford." She set down her bag. "I sent a telegram from Helena. I assume you received it." "I did, Miss Ashford." He struggled to find words. "I think there might be some confusion. I was not expecting—" "You were not expecting me," she finished. Her expression did not change. "You expected someone plainer, older, someone who looks like the frontier already." Ethan felt heat rise to his face. "I meant no insult. I understand." She picked up her bag again. "But I am who I said I was. I can work. I will work. And I did not come all this way to turn back now." There was something in her words, not pride, not vanity, determination, like she was running from something worse than the Montana winter. Ethan nodded toward his wagon. "If the arrangement still stands for you, it stands for me." "It does," Claire said, "and I would prefer we stop freezing on this platform." He loaded her trunk onto the wagon bed. The driver gave him a knowing grin that Ethan ignored. Claire climbed onto the seat without waiting for help. She arranged her skirts and sat with her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Ethan took the reins. The horses pulled away from the station, heading west toward the open land. For the first mile they rode in silence. The road was frozen rutted from the last wagon traffic before winter truly set in. The landscape spread around them vast and empty. Snow clung to the hollows. The mountains rose in the distance, white and impassable. The ranch is 30 miles from town, Ethan said, keeping his eyes on the road. In winter, we can be cut off for weeks at a time. I grew up on a farm 40 miles outside Boston, Claire replied. I am accustomed to isolation. Montana isolation is different. Perhaps. She looked out at the landscape. But at least here the isolation is honest. Ethan glanced at her. She was watching the mountains, her expression unreadable. Why did you leave Boston? He asked. Her hands tightened on her bag. My father died 2 years ago. The farm was sold. I went to live with my aunt. She wanted me to marry a man I could not marry. I refused. She told me to find my own way. The man. Ethan chose his words carefully. Was he cruel? Claire was silent for a long moment. Cruel enough that I would rather starve in Montana than live wealthy beside him. Something in her voice told Ethan there was more to the story, but he did not push. He had his own secrets. He could respect hers. They crested a rise and the Brooks Ranch came into view. The cabin sat near the creek smoke rising from the chimney. The barn stood behind it solid and weathered. The corrals spread out to the south. Cattle dotted the winter pasture dark shapes against white snow. It is not much, Ethan said. Claire looked at the ranch and her face changed. Something softened in her expression, something that might have been wonder. Mr. Brooks, she said quietly, it is beautiful. Ethan had expected criticism, disappointment. Instead, he heard genuine appreciation in her voice. It is free, Claire continued. In Boston, everything is crowded, houses pressed together, people watching from every window. Here there is space to breathe. She turned to look at him, and for the first time he saw past her elegant exterior to the exhaustion beneath. This was a woman who had been running, who had been afraid, who had come to the end of her endurance and found somehow this place. They drove the last quarter mile in silence. Ethan pulled the wagon up to the cabin. He helped Claire down, his hand briefly touching hers. Her fingers were cold through her gloves. Inside the cabin was warm from the fire he had left burning. The main room held a table, 4 chairs, a wood stove, and the stone fireplace. Rough but clean, functional. This is the kitchen, Ethan said, gesturing to the stove and counter space. Water comes from the pump outside. There is a root cellar for storage. He showed her through the cabin. His bedroom small and spare. The larger bedroom which he had cleaned and prepared for her. She looked at it without comment. A bed, a chest of drawers, a single window facing east. Is there a lock for the door? Claire asked. Ethan stopped. A lock? Yes. She met his eyes. If possible. He searched her face. Fear flickered there, quickly hidden. I will install one tomorrow. Thank you. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Not because of you. I just need to know I can shut out the world. That evening, Ethan cooked venison stew and cornbread. Claire ate little, picking at her food. She was tired from travel, he told himself, or perhaps she was reconsidering her decision. If this does not suit you, Ethan said, breaking the silence. If you want to leave, I will drive you back to town. I will pay your passage to wherever you want to go. Claire looked up from her plate. I will not need to leave, Mr. Brooks. I came here to stay. Even so, the offer stands. She nodded. I appreciate that. But I meant what I wrote in my letter. I am here to work, to build something. If you are honest with me, I will be honest with you. I will be, Ethan promised. After dinner, Claire excused herself to her room. Ethan heard the door close. A moment later, he heard the scrape of furniture. She was pushing something against the door, a chair perhaps, or the chest of drawers. He sat by the fire until late, listening to the wind outside. Through the thin walls he thought he heard crying, soft, muffled, quickly stifled. He stood intending to knock to ask if she was well, but he stopped himself. She had asked for a lock, for privacy, for space. He would give her that. In the morning she emerged composed and calm, as if the tears had never happened. The second day, Ethan showed her the ranch. They walked to the barn first, the largest structure on the property, 40 feet by 60 with 12 horse stalls and a hayloft. The smell of hay and horses wrapped around them. "You said you grew up on a horse farm," Ethan said. "I did." Claire walked between the stalls, her movements easy and confident. The horses turned to watch her. One, a gray mare, nickered softly. "My father was a veterinarian," Claire continued. "I assisted him from the time I was 12 years old." Ethan stopped. "A veterinarian?" "Yes." She ran her hand along the gray mare's neck. "He was very skilled. He could have been wealthy treating the horses of rich men, but he preferred to help farmers, people who needed him." "What happened to him?" Claire's hand stilled. "He was called to treat a nobleman's prize stallion, an Arabian worth $5,000. The horse was already sick when he arrived. He did everything he could, but the horse died." She was quiet for a moment. "The nobleman blamed him," she continued, "destroyed his reputation, said he was incompetent. No one would hire him after that. He died 6 months later. They said it was heart failure, but really it was a broken spirit." Ethan heard the pain in her voice, the old wound still raw. "I am sorry," he said. "I could not save the nobleman's horse," Claire said softly. "I could not save my father, but perhaps I can be useful here." She moved to the far stall. A chestnut mare stood inside her belly, swollen with foal. The mare shifted her weight, restless and uncomfortable. "Willow," Ethan said. "She is due any day now." Claire stepped into the stall. The mare did not flinch. Claire ran her hands along Willow's belly, her touch professional, her eyes focused. She stood very still, listening with her fingers, the way some people can. "She is close," Claire said. "Very close. Less than 2 days, I would say, and I feel something wrong." "Wrong how?" "The foal's position. It is not quite right." She met his eyes. "We will need to watch her carefully." That night, long after the lamps were extinguished and the cabin had gone silent, a scream tore through the darkness. Not human. Animal. A horse in terrible distress. Ethan shot out of bed, pulling on his boots. He rushed into the main room and stopped. Claire's door stood open. She was already gone. He ran into the frozen yard, the cold biting through his shirt. He burst into the barn. Lantern light flickered inside Willow's stall. Claire knelt in the straw, wearing her nightgown beneath Ethan's spare coat. Her sleeves were rolled up, her face was set with urgent control. "She has been straining for an hour," Claire said without looking up. "Something is wrong." Willow thrashed, her eyes rolling white with fear and pain. She tried to stand, fell, tried again. Each movement was agony. Claire looked at Ethan. "We need more light. Now!" Ethan moved fast. He hung lanterns one after another until the barn glowed bright and wavering. Willow lay on her side, her breath coming in hard gasps. Her coat was dark with sweat despite the freezing air. "Hold her head," Claire said. "Talk to her. Keep her calm." Ethan knelt by Willow's neck. He stroked her face, speaking softly. "Easy, girl. Easy. Claire will help you." Claire scrubbed her hands and arms with soap and freezing water. The cold made Ethan's teeth ache just watching. Then she knelt beside Willow, pressed her hand to the mare's belly, and closed her eyes. "I need to check the position," she said. Her voice was steady, but Ethan saw fear in her eyes. She reached carefully inside. Her face tightened at once. "One leg is back," she said quietly. "The foal is coming wrong. If I cannot reposition it, we will lose them both." "Can you fix it?" Ethan asked. "I have to." Claire's jaw set. "When I tell you pull steady, not hard, steady." For 20 minutes the only sounds were Willow struggling and Claire's careful instructions. Claire worked by feel alone, sweat on her brow despite the cold. Her arm trembled with effort. Twice she stopped to flex her fingers, then went back to work. Ethan watched her hands and saw something that stunned him. She was afraid, but she did not quit. "Now," Claire said suddenly. "She is about to strain. Get the ropes." Ethan already had them ready, soft hemp 1/4 inch thick. He looped them where Claire indicated around the foal's legs that he could not see. Willow strained her whole body, convulsing with effort. Ethan pulled with her steady and firm, timing it to the mare's contractions. Claire's eyes stayed locked on her work. Her jaw was clenched. "Again," she said. Willow strained. They pulled. The foal's head appeared wet and dark, then shoulders, and then with a rush that seemed both impossible and inevitable, the foal slid into the straw. It did not move. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Claire was on it immediately, clearing its nose, rubbing hard with a clean cloth. She murmured low words, part prayer, part command. "Breathe," she whispered. "Come on, breathe." The foal gasped, a weak cough, a stronger one, then a thin, sharp cry that filled the barn like the most beautiful sound Ethan had ever heard. He felt tears on his face. Willow lifted her head, nickering softly. She reached toward her baby with her nose. The foal wobbled legs too long and uncertain. But it lived. Claire laughed through tears. "She is alive! She is alive!" They stayed with Willow and her foal until the little one stood and found milk. Only then did Claire allow herself to sag back against the stall wall. Her whole body shook. Outside, the sky was turning pale with dawn. In the cabin, Claire tried to clean up, but her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the soap. Ethan pumped water for her, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She stood by the stove, breathing through shivers that had nothing to do with cold. "You should rest," he said. "I will," she answered, "after I know they are safe." By morning, with strong coffee by the fire, Claire met his gaze like she had something to prove. "I meant it," she said. "I can do this life. I am not leaving." Ethan looked at her, really looked. Her hair had come loose. Her cheeks were flushed. Her eyes were bright with exhaustion and pride, and something fierce he could not name. He had expected a pretty woman who would flinch at hard work. Instead, he had gotten a woman who had just saved his best mare and her foal. "I believe you," Ethan said, and he meant it. Claire smiled. "The foal needs a name. What would you call her? Dawn, because she was born at daybreak, and because this feels like a new beginning." Ethan did not argue. The name felt right. The days fell into rhythm. Claire woke at 5 before Ethan. She started the coffee, prepared breakfast. She worked alongside him, learning the ranch. She could ride, he discovered, not well but competently. Her father had taught her. She learned to mend fences, to check the cattle, to read the brands of neighboring ranches. The Brooks brand was BB within a circle. Thomas Garrett's brand was TG Bar. On the 6th day they went to town for supplies. Birch Creek was small, 300 people give or take. Main Street held the general store, a saloon, the church, the marshal's office, and the Montana Territorial Bank. People stopped to stare when Ethan helped Claire down from the wagon. The whispers started immediately. "Too refined for ranch life. Boston women never stay. She will run before winter ends." Thomas Garrett stood outside the general store. He was 40 years old, well-dressed in a suit that came from San Francisco. His ranch spread over 1,200 acres to the east. He employed 40 men. He had money from investments back east, sources of income Ethan neither understood nor trusted. Garrett approached them, hat in hand, smile on his face. "Mr. Brooks, and this must be your bride." "Mr. Garrett," Ethan said flatly. "Mrs. Brooks." Garrett's eyes moved over Claire with the assessment of a man evaluating livestock. "You are far too refined for ranch life. If it does not suit, I have a large house and many opportunities for a woman of culture." Claire's expression went cold. "I am standing exactly where I wish to be, Mr. Garrett." Ethan stepped between them. "My wife has made herself clear." Garrett's smile did not fade. "Of course, only a friendly offer." But his eyes said something different. They said, "I want what you have, and I always get what I want." That night Ethan woke screaming, "Connor, no, do not do it." He found himself in the main room, shaking and covered in sweat. His heart hammered. The dream clung to him like smoke. Claire appeared in the doorway of her room. She said nothing. She went to the stove, put water on to boil, and sat down across from him. After a long silence, Ethan spoke. "My brother. I could not save him." Claire's eyes were kind. "Some people cannot be saved, But you are still here. That means something." They sat until dawn. Few words passed between them, but something shifted. They were no longer strangers. 1 month after her arrival on the 15th of March, Ethan broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "It has been a month," he said. "It has. The arrangement was for a trial period. If you wish to leave—" "I do not wish to leave." Ethan took a breath. "I know this was meant to be practical, but I want you to know you are safe here. If you want to stay as partners, as friends, that is enough for me." Claire met his eyes. "And if I want more—" His breath caught. "Then we take it slow. Build trust first." "I would like that." They married the next day. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony in the main room with the fire crackling and the wind pressing against the walls. The vows were simple, legal and binding. But more than that, they were honest. "I promise to protect you, respect you, and never ask more than you can give," Ethan said. "I promise to stand beside you, work with you, and build something worth keeping," Claire answered. After the Reverend left, the cabin felt different, warmer, less lonely. That night they still slept in separate rooms, but the door between them remained unlocked. Late March brought the first real storm of the season. The sky turned gray, heavy, and bruised. The wind rose fast, cutting across the open land like a blade. Ethan checked the barometer. It had dropped sharply. Doc Henderson, making his monthly visit to check on Claire's health, looked at the sky and frowned. "Blizzard coming," he said. "A bad one." That evening the wind began to howl. Snow fell in sheets, turning the world white and blind. Ethan moved the livestock close to the barn. Most came willingly, sensing the storm, but Dawn, still young and easily frightened, bolted from the near corral. Ethan did not think. He grabbed a rope and ran after her. The wind swallowed him. Snow drove into his face, stinging like needles. His eyes watered. Within minutes he could not see the ranch, could not see his own hands in front of his face. He caught Dawn, got the rope around her neck. But when he turned back, he realized with cold certainty that he had no idea which direction led home. The world was nothing but white. He kept walking, trusting instinct, memory, hope. The cold sank into his fingers, his toes, his lungs. His thoughts began to slow. He knew the signs. Hypothermia. He was dying. A voice called his name, faint at first, then closer. "Ethan." A shape materialized through the snow. Claire, a rope tied around her waist. The other end stretched back into the white, anchored to something solid. The porch, he realized later. She had tied herself to the porch and followed the rope into the storm. She grabbed his arm with both hands. "Follow the rope," she said, her voice fierce. "Now!" Ethan stumbled beside her, half carried by her strength and will. Dawn followed, too frightened now to bolt. The rope guided them through chaos. When the cabin finally appeared, Ethan nearly wept with relief. Inside, Claire stripped his wet coat and pushed him toward the bedroom. "You are freezing," she said. "Get in the bed." "I am fine." "You are not fine." She shoved quilts over him, then climbed in beside him, fully dressed, pressing against him. "Body heat. Be still." Ethan shook so hard he could not speak. Claire held him, rubbing his arms, whispering until the shaking eased and warmth returned in painful, stinging waves. When he could finally breathe again, he turned and saw tears on her face. "You scared me," she said. "I thought I would lose you." "I am sorry. I did not think. I just wanted to save Dawn." "You matter more." Her voice broke. "More than Dawn. More than this ranch. Do you not understand that—" Ethan lifted a trembling hand to her cheek. He kissed her. For a heartbeat she went still. Then she kissed him back, fierce and honest, like she was done being careful. Later, with the storm still screaming outside and the fire crackling in the next room, Claire looked into his face. "Do you want me here?" she asked. "Not as help, not as a deal. Do you want me—" "I want you." Ethan said, his voice rough. "I have wanted you. I was just scared." Her eyes filled with tears. "So was I." They held each other through the night. And in that small cabin in the middle of a Montana storm, they stopped pretending this was only practical. They chose each other for real. The fire in the hearth had burned low. Outside the window of the main room, December's snow continued to fall. Samuel sat forward in his chair, eyes wide. "And then what happened?" he asked. Ethan smiled. "That is a story for tomorrow, boy. Your grandmother will have my hide if I keep you up all night." "But did she stay? Did you live happily?" "She stayed," Ethan said softly. "And we built a life, not always easy, not always happy, but always together. That is what matters." He reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. "Go on now. Get to bed. Tomorrow I will tell you about the man from Boston and how your grandmother faced down her past with nothing but courage and a rusty derringer." Samuel stood reluctantly. At the doorway he turned back. "Grandfather." "Yes. I am glad she chose you." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "So am I, son. So am I." When the boy was gone, Ethan sat alone by the fire. Through the window he could see the lights of the ranch. 1,500 acres now, prosperity and peace. But it had not come easy. He closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. Claire stepping off that stage, the night willow fold, the blizzard that nearly killed him, the choice she made to run into the storm and save him. Some choices he thought change everything, and the choice to love even when afraid was the bravest choice of all. The next morning Samuel appeared at breakfast with questions burning in his eyes. Claire set down plates of eggs and bacon, smiling at her grandson's impatience. "Your grandfather promised to tell you more," she said. Ethan poured coffee, his movements slow and deliberate. "I did. But boy, you need to understand something first. What came next was not easy. Montana does not forgive weakness, and the past we thought we had left behind was already looking for us." Samuel glanced at his grandmother. She nodded, her expression growing serious. "The blizzard was only the beginning," Ethan said. "After that night everything changed between us. But love does not protect you from the world. Sometimes it makes you more vulnerable, because now you have something precious to lose." He settled back in his chair, coffee cup warming his hands. "Let me tell you about the spring of 1878, about the man who came from Boston, and about the choice your grandmother had to make between justice and survival." The weeks following the blizzard passed in a kind of peace that Ethan had not known since before the war. He and Claire fell into rhythms of work and companionship that felt, if not easy, then natural. Right. They woke together before dawn. Claire made coffee while Ethan started the fire. They worked side by side, feeding livestock, checking fences, preparing for spring calving. In the evenings they sat by the hearth and talked. Small things, the weather, the horses, plans for expanding the garden come summer. But there were silences too, comfortable ones, the kind that only come when two people no longer feel the need to fill every moment with words. March gave way to April. The snow began to melt. The creek ran high and fast with runoff. Dawn, the foal born in crisis, grew stronger each day. Her legs were long and awkward, but her spirit was fierce. She followed Willow everywhere, never straying far from her mother's protection. Claire spent hours with them, training Dawn gently, teaching her to accept a halter to lead to trust human hands. Ethan watched from the barn door, struck by the patience in her movements, the quiet authority. "She will be a good horse," Claire said one afternoon, running her hand along Dawn's neck. "Strong, loyal, like her mother," Ethan said. Claire smiled. "I was talking about the horse." He laughed. It was a sound that surprised him. He had not laughed much in the 3 years since Connor died, but with Claire laughter came easier. April brought the first real warmth. The grass began to green. The cattle spread out across the range, grazing on new growth. Ethan hired 2 ranch hands for the spring work, good men who asked few questions and did their jobs without complaint. Life felt for the first time in years like it might be sustainable, possible. Then the man from Boston arrived. It was a Tuesday. Ethan and Claire had gone to Birch Creek for supplies. The town was busy, ranchers and farmers taking advantage of the improved weather to stock up. Ethan loaded flour and coffee and salt into the wagon, while Claire went to the general store for fabric and thread. He did not notice the stranger at first. The man stood outside the saloon, well dressed in an Eastern suit. He was perhaps 45, with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He held a leather portfolio under one arm. The man approached the marshal's office. Ethan saw him show something to Marshal Robert Kane. A photograph, it looked like. The marshal shook his head. The man moved on, asking questions of merchants, of loiterers, of anyone who would listen. Ethan felt unease crawl up his spine. Then he saw Thomas Garrett emerge from the bank. Garrett's eyes found the stranger. They spoke briefly. Garrett looked at the photograph the man offered, and Garrett smiled. Ethan was loading the last sack of flour when Claire returned. She held a small bundle of fabric, her expression content. But when she saw his face, she stopped. "What is wrong?" "There is a man asking questions, a stranger from back east." Claire went very still. "What kind of questions?" "I do not know, but Garrett was talking to him." The color drained from her face. "We need to leave, now." They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Claire kept looking over her shoulder, scanning the empty road behind them. Her hands twisted the fabric in her lap. At the cabin she went straight to her room. Ethan heard drawers opening, things being moved. When she emerged, she held a small object wrapped in cloth. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told you before." They sat at the table. Claire unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a locket, gold delicate, with a small portrait visible through the glass front. The portrait showed a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes. "Her name was Catherine Miller," Claire said quietly. "She was engaged to be married to a man named Edmund Ashworth, a wealthy merchant in Boston. She disappeared in October of 1876. Ethan picked up the locket carefully. The gold was tarnished. The chain showed dark stains that might have been blood. "The police said she ran away," Claire continued, "that she got cold feet about the marriage and fled. Her family did not believe it. Catherine loved Edmund, or so everyone thought." "Where did you get this?" Claire took a shaky breath. "My Aunt Beatrice wanted me to marry Edmund after Catherine disappeared. It would be a good match, she said. He was wealthy, respected, well-connected. I went to his house for dinner. I wandered into his study looking for the washroom. I found a hidden drawer. This was inside." She pointed to the dark stains on the chain. "Catherine's mother had given her this locket. It never left her neck. And here it was hidden in Edmund's desk, with blood on it." Ethan's hands tightened on the locket. "You think he killed her?" "I know he did. I took the locket. I did not know what else to do. Who would believe me? Edmund was rich, powerful. I was nobody. But I knew if I stayed, if I married him, I would end up like Catherine." "So you ran?" "My aunt was furious when I refused the marriage. She said I was throwing away my future. When I told her why, she called me hysterical. She said I had stolen from Edmund and needed to return the locket immediately. I refused. She told me to leave and never come back." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I kept the locket because it is the only proof Catherine was murdered. But Edmund has resources, money, connections. He could send investigators, bounty hunters, anyone. And now one is here." "Yes." Ethan set the locket down carefully. "Then we face it together." The next day the man from Boston came to the ranch. Ethan saw the horse and buggy approaching from a distance. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. Not raised, just visible. The man climbed down from the buggy, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who understood he was on uncertain ground. He stopped 10 feet from the porch. "Mr. Brooks." "Who is asking?" "My name is Charles Pemberton. I am a private investigator from Boston." "I do not know anyone in Boston." "Perhaps not, but your wife does." Pemberton pulled the photograph from his portfolio and held it up. It showed Claire younger in formal dress. "Miss Claire Ashford, or should I say Mrs. Claire Brooks?" Claire appeared in the doorway. Ethan felt her presence behind him, solid and steady despite her fear. "My name is Claire Brooks," she said clearly. "Mrs. Brooks." Pemberton inclined his head politely. "I am here on behalf of Lord Edmund Ashworth. You possess property belonging to him, a locket. I am authorized to retrieve it. I possess nothing but what I brought with me. Come now, Mrs. Brooks. We both know that is not true. Lord Ashworth is willing to forget this misunderstanding. Return the locket, and you will hear no more about it." Ethan raised the rifle slightly. "Mr. Pemberton, you have 10 seconds to get off my land." Pemberton did not flinch. "I will return, with Marshal Kane and a search warrant. This ranch is in Montana territory. The law still applies." "Then bring the law. But you are trespassing now." Pemberton climbed back into his buggy. Before leaving, he looked at Claire one more time. "Lord Ashworth is a patient man, Mrs. Brooks, but his patience has limits." When he was gone, Claire sagged against the doorframe. "He will come back," she said, "and next time he will have the authority to search, to take me back to Boston." "Then we prepare," Ethan said. "We get our own legal counsel. We fight this the right way." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. The law favored men like Edmund Ashworth, rich men, connected men, men who could afford the best lawyers and the best lies. They had little time. Over the next week, Ethan made quiet inquiries. He spoke to Reverend Mitchell, who knew the territorial judge. He spoke to other ranchers' men who had been in Montana longer, who understood how power worked on the frontier. The news was not good. If Edmund Ashworth pressed charges for theft, Claire could be extradited to Massachusetts. The locket was worth more than $500. That made it grand larceny, a serious crime. "But she did not steal it," Ethan protested to Reverend Mitchell. "She found evidence of murder." "Can you prove murder?" the Reverend asked gently. "Without a body, without witnesses against a man of Ashworth's standing." Ethan had no answer. At night he lay awake, turning the problem over in his mind. Claire slept fitfully beside him. They shared a bed now, though more for comfort than passion. She had nightmares, dreams where Edmund found her where she disappeared like Catherine. Ethan would wake to find her trembling, and he would hold her until the fear passed. "I will not let them take you," he promised. "You cannot stop the law." "Then we will run, take the horses and go north. Canada is not far. And abandon everything you built, your family's ranch. I will not ask that of you." "You are not asking. I am offering." But Claire shook her head. "There has to be another way." The answer came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after Pemberton's visit, a wagon arrived at the ranch. An older woman climbed down, dressed for travel, but showing the wear of a long journey. Her face was lined with age and worry. Her eyes, when they found Claire, filled with tears. "Aunt Beatrice," Claire whispered. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between the women. "Ma'am, state your business." The woman looked at him, assessing. Then she seemed to deflate all the starch going out of her spine. "I came to beg forgiveness," she said quietly, "and to help if I can." Inside the cabin, Beatrice Ashford sat with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she did not drink. She was 52 years old, Ethan learned, Claire's father's sister, the only family Claire had left. "I did not know," Beatrice said, her voice breaking, "about Catherine. I swear I did not know." "You did not want to know," Claire said coldly. "You are right. I was willfully blind. I wanted the match, the money, the respectability. I did not ask the questions I should have asked." She set down the teacup with shaking hands. "After you left, I could not stop thinking about what you said, about the locket, about Catherine. So I went to her family, the Millers. I asked them about Catherine's disappearance." Beatrice pulled a folded newspaper from her bag. The Boston Herald, dated March 20th, 1878. She unfolded it and pointed to a small article on the 3rd page. "Body found in Charles River. Young woman identified as Catherine Miller." Ethan read quickly. Catherine's body had been found by fishermen caught in the pilings beneath a dock. She had been in the water for months. The coroner ruled it accidental drowning, but there were details. Bruises on her wrists, mostly decomposed but still visible, marks that suggested she had been bound. The Millers had protested the ruling. Their daughter could not swim. She was terrified of water. She would never have gone near the river willingly. The investigation was closed anyway. Lack of evidence. "Edmund killed her," Beatrice said. "I have no doubt now. And I almost gave you to him. I almost sent you to the same fate." Claire's face was pale. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I hired my own investigator, a good one. He found things, patterns." Beatrice produced more papers, reports, witness statements, financial records. Edmund Ashworth had been engaged 3 times before Catherine, once in London, once in New York, once in Philadelphia. Each time the woman had disappeared. Each time Edmund inherited money from their families, small amounts carefully hidden in complex financial transactions. But the pattern was clear. Edmund Ashworth was a killer, and he was very good at it. "This still does not prove anything in a court of law," Ethan said, studying the documents. "No," Beatrice agreed, "but it gives context, and I brought something else." She pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were letters, correspondence between Edmund and various business associates. In one, dated 2 months after Catherine's disappearance, Edmund mentioned needing to dispose of certain complications and thanked the recipient for assistance in the matter. It was not a confession, but it was suggestive, damning in the right hands. "What do you want us to do with this?" Claire asked. "Send the locket to Catherine's family," Beatrice said. "Let them pursue justice in Boston. You stay here safe. I will testify if needed. I will make sure Edmund faces consequences. And if he comes after me anyway, he is already under scrutiny. The Millers are wealthy too, not as much as Edmund, but enough to hire good lawyers. If they push, if they make noise, Edmund will be too busy defending himself to chase you across the country." It was not a perfect plan, but it was something. Claire looked at Ethan. "What do you think?" "I think your aunt is trying to make amends, and I think she might be right. But it means giving up the only evidence I have, trusting that someone else will fight this battle." "Yes," Beatrice said softly. "It means trusting me. I know I have not earned that trust, but I am asking anyway." Claire was quiet for a long time. Finally she nodded. "I will do it. But Aunt Beatrice, you need to stay in Montana, at least until we know Edmund is in custody." "I plan to. There is a boarding house in town. I can stay there. And if Pemberton comes back, then we tell him the truth. The locket is gone, given to its rightful owners." 2 days later, Beatrice left for Boston with the locket and all the documents. Ethan and Claire watched the stage pull away, carrying their best hope for justice. "What if it does not work?" Claire asked. "Then we deal with whatever comes, together." But Claire looked unconvinced. She pressed a hand to her stomach, an unconscious gesture Ethan had noticed her making more frequently over the past week. "Claire," he said carefully, "is there something you need to tell me?" She turned to face him, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "I am late," she whispered. 2 weeks late. I think I might be with child." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. A child. His child. Their child. Joy hit him first, bright and overwhelming. Then fear followed, cold and fast. Childbirth in 1878 was dangerous. Women died. Babies died. He could lose them both. "Are you certain?" he managed to ask. "Not certain. But I know my body, and I feel different." Ethan pulled her close, holding her as if he could shield her from every danger on earth. "We will be careful," he said. "We will get Doc Henderson. We will prepare. I want this child, Ethan. I want our child. Then we will do everything to keep you both safe." But even as he spoke, he knew that some things could not be controlled. Some things could only be endured. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Claire suffered from morning sickness that lasted all day. She grew dizzy easily. Her energy, usually boundless, flagged after the simplest tasks. Doc Henderson made weekly visits, monitoring her carefully. "Some women just have harder pregnancies," he said. "Bed rest would help." But Claire refused. "I am pregnant, not made of glass." "You are carrying precious cargo," Ethan countered. "That makes you precious too." They argued about it daily. Claire insisted on working. Ethan hovered, worried, trying to take every burden from her shoulders. It drove her to frustration. "I will not be an invalid," she snapped one afternoon. "I will not sit idle while you do everything." "I am trying to protect you." "I know, but I need to feel useful. If I just sit and wait, I will go mad with worry." They found a compromise. Claire worked half-days, resting in the afternoons. Ethan hired additional help for the heavier tasks. It was not perfect, but it was manageable. Until Thomas Garrett came calling. It was early June. Claire was nearly 3 months pregnant, though not showing yet. Ethan was in the north pasture checking fences when Garrett arrived. Claire was alone at the cabin hanging laundry. She saw the horse and rider approaching. Every instinct screamed danger. Garrett dismounted at the porch, hat in hand, smile on his face. "Mrs. Brooks, I heard you were indisposed. I wanted to check on your welfare." "I am well, Mr. Garrett. Thank you for your concern." "I also heard," he continued, "that you had a visitor from Boston. An investigator, was it?" Claire's hands stilled on the laundry. "News travels fast. In a small town, yes. I could not help but wonder what brings a Boston investigator all the way to Montana." "That is not your concern." Garrett's smile widened. "But it is Mrs. Brooks. You see, I had a very interesting conversation with Mr. Pemberton. He told me you are wanted for theft, a valuable locket belonging to Edmund Ashworth." "I stole nothing." "Perhaps, but that is for the courts to decide, is it not?" He stepped closer. "I also learned that you are with child. Congratulations." Claire felt ice in her veins. "What do you want, Garrett?" "I want to help. You and your husband are in a difficult position. Pemberton will return with a warrant. Your home will be searched. You will be arrested, likely extradited to Boston. The stress could be very bad for your condition. Get to the point. Sell me your ranch. Take the money and leave Montana. Go somewhere safe, somewhere the law cannot find you. Start over. This ranch is not for sale." "Everything is for sale, Mrs. Brooks. The question is price. I am offering you freedom, safety for your child. Is your husband's pride worth more than that? You do not understand. This ranch is his family's legacy, and you are his family now. Which matters more?" Claire felt trapped, cornered. "I need to speak with Ethan." "Of course, but my offer expires in 1 week. After that I will tell Pemberton exactly where to find what he is looking for." Garrett mounted his horse. Before riding away he tipped his hat. 1 week, Mrs. Brooks. Think carefully." When Ethan returned that evening, Claire told him everything. He listened in growing fury. "Garrett has been spying on us," he said. "He knows about the locket. He is using it as leverage. What are we going to do? We stand our ground. The locket is gone. Pemberton can search all he wants. He will find nothing. But Garrett said he knows where it is. The locket is with your aunt halfway to Boston by now. Garrett is bluffing." But Claire was not convinced, and neither, if he was honest, was Ethan. 4 days later, Charles Pemberton returned. This time he brought Marshal Kane and a signed warrant from Territorial Judge Harrison. They searched the cabin, the barn, the root cellar, the smokehouse, every building on the property. They found nothing. "Where is it?" Pemberton demanded. "I told you," Claire said calmly. "I destroyed it, melted it down, and sold the gold." It was a lie, but it was unprovable. Marshal Kane looked at Pemberton. "If there is no locket, there is no theft. I am done here." Pemberton's face darkened with frustration, but he had no choice. Without evidence, he had no case. After they left, Ethan held Claire while she shook with relief. "It is over," he said, but it was not. That afternoon, Thomas Garrett arrived, alone this time. His face was no longer friendly, no more pretense. "I know the locket is not here," he said. "Your aunt took it to Boston weeks ago." Ethan felt his blood run cold. "How do you know that?" "I have been watching, waiting. I have friends at the stage depot. They tell me things." "What do you want, Garrett?" "What I have always wanted, your land, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to get it. The locket is gone. You have no leverage." Garrett smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "No, Edmund Ashworth has offered $5,000 for your wife's return to Boston, alive or dead. I could collect that bounty very easily." Ethan's hand moved to his rifle. "You would kidnap her." "I would do what is necessary. Business, Brooks, nothing personal. Get off my land." "Or what? You will shoot me in front of witnesses," Garrett gestured. Ethan saw movement in the trees. Men. Garrett's men watching. But then other horses appeared, riders from town, neighbors, Reverend Mitchell in the lead. They had heard about the confrontation, had come to help. Garrett looked at the gathering crowd, and his confidence faltered. Marshal Kane rode up last. "Mr. Garrett, I heard you making threats. That sounded an awful lot like attempted kidnapping." "I was just leaving," Garrett said quickly. "Yes, you are. And you are going to leave in handcuffs." The marshal arrested Garrett there in front of everyone. The charge was attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, and harassment. It would not hold forever. Garrett had money lawyers. But it was enough. For now. As they led Garrett away, he looked at Ethan with cold fury. "This is not over," he said. But it was. A week later, news came from Boston. Edmund Ashworth had been arrested. The locket combined with Beatrice's testimony and the evidence she had gathered was enough to bring charges. Murder, fraud, conspiracy. The trial was set for November, and in Montana, as summer deepened and Claire's pregnancy advanced, they finally allowed themselves to believe they might be safe. Thomas Garrett remained in custody awaiting trial. His lawyers argued and delayed, but the evidence was clear. The attempted kidnapping charge, combined with cattle rustling and fraud, would keep him behind bars for years. His ranch sat empty, waiting for auction. Doc Henderson visited in late August. Claire was nearly 7 months pregnant now. Her belly had swollen, making work difficult. She moved slowly, carefully, one hand always supporting her back. The doctor examined her, his expression growing concerned. "Your blood pressure is high," he said, "higher than I like." "What does that mean?" Ethan asked. "It means she is at risk for complications, premature labor, eclampsia, both dangerous." "What can we do?" "Complete bed rest, no exceptions." Claire started to protest, but Doc Henderson cut her off. "Mrs. Brooks, I am not asking. If you want this baby to survive, you need to rest, now." For the next 6 weeks, Claire stayed in bed. Ethan brought her meals read to her, sat with her through the long, boring hours. She chafed at the restriction, but obeyed. In early September, she woke him in the middle of the night. "Ethan, something is wrong." He lit the lamp. Claire's face was pale, twisted with pain. "Contractions," she gasped. "It is too early. The baby is not due for another month." Doc Henderson arrived within the hour, summoned by Ethan's frantic midnight ride. He examined Claire quickly. "Early labor," he confirmed. "We need to stop it if we can." He gave her medication, something to slow the contractions. For hours they waited. Ethan held Claire's hand, praying to a God he was not sure he believed in anymore. Finally, near dawn, the contractions slowed, stopped. "She is staying put," Doc said. "For now. But Mrs. Brooks, you need to make it to at least 8 months, preferably longer. Every day counts." Claire nodded weakly. "I will try." "And you," Doc said to Ethan, "need to prepare yourself. When her time comes, it is going to be difficult. Very difficult." Outside, the sun was rising over the Montana landscape. Another day, another chance. But Ethan could not shake the fear that wrapped around his heart like a fist. Childbirth had killed his mother. It had killed countless women he knew, strong women, healthy women, and now it threatened the person he loved most in the world. He sat by Claire's bedside watching her sleep and made himself a promise. Whatever happened, whatever choices had to be made, he would not lose her. He could not. Back in the warm cabin of 1919, Ethan paused in his story. Samuel sat forward, hands gripped together. "Did she live?" the boy asked. "Did the baby live?" Ethan smiled gently. "Your mother is alive, is she not? And your grandmother sits in the next room." "But you said it was difficult." "The most difficult thing I have ever faced. Harder than war. Harder than losing Connor. Because this time I had to choose who to save. And that choice nearly broke me." He stood, joints creaking, and walked to the window. Outside, snow continued to fall. "That is a story for tomorrow, Samuel. Some stories need to be told in daylight, when the shadows are not so dark." The boy nodded, understanding, despite his youth, that some truths were too heavy to carry into sleep. After Samuel had gone to bed, Claire joined Ethan by the fire. She took his hand, her touch still warm, still steady after 41 years. "You are telling him everything," she said. It was not a question. "He needs to know. The ranch will be his one day. He should know what it cost to build. What we almost lost. What we did lose," Ethan corrected gently. "And what we saved." Claire leaned against his shoulder. Outside, the winter wind sang its ancient song across the Montana plains. The same wind that had blown the night she arrived, the night Willow foaled, the night of the blizzard. Some things Ethan thought never changed. The land endured. Love endured. Everything else was just the story of how you survived the storms. The third morning found Samuel at the table before dawn waiting. Claire set down bread and preserves, but the boy barely touched them. His eyes were fixed on his grandfather. Ethan entered slowly, moving like a man who carried the weight of memory in his bones. He poured coffee and sat down with a heaviness that had nothing to do with age. "The night your mother was born," he said without preamble, "was the longest night of my life. I thought I would lose them both, and I had to face a choice no man should ever have to make." Samuel's hands gripped the edge of the table. "What choice?" "You will understand. But first let me tell you about the weeks leading up to that night, about the fear that sat in my chest like a stone, about what it means to love something so much that the thought of losing it makes you want to stop breathing." September arrived with clear skies and cool nights. The aspens on the mountainside began to turn gold. The cattle fattened on the last of the summer grass. Everything spoke of abundance, of harvest of nature preparing for winter. But inside the cabin, Ethan prepared for something far more uncertain. Claire was 8 months pregnant now. Her belly had swollen large and round, pulling her spine into an uncomfortable curve. She could not sleep lying down anymore. She dozed in a chair propped up with pillows, waking every few hours when the baby kicked or her back spasmed. Doc Henderson had taken up residence in the barn's small tack room, sleeping there most nights. He wanted to be close when labor started, because when it started, he said there would be no time to ride for help. Ethan had gathered supplies according to the doctor's instructions. Clean linens boiled and stored in sealed containers. Water, always water kept hot on the stove. Laudanum for pain, though the doctor warned it could slow labor if used too early. Forceps gleaming and terrible laid out on clean cloth. Chloroform. A last resort for emergencies so dire Ethan did not want to think about them. He had also gathered other things. A Bible, though he had not opened it since Connor died. A bottle of whiskey for himself, for courage or grief depending on how things went. And he had written a letter sealed and addressed to Beatrice Ashford in Boston to be sent only if the worst happened. He tried not to think about that letter, tried not to imagine writing the words, "Your niece is dead," tried not to picture himself alone again standing over another grave. But the thoughts came anyway, especially in the dark hours before dawn when Claire's breathing changed and he jolted awake certain something was wrong. "You need to sleep," Claire told him one night. "You are exhausted." "I will sleep when you are safe." "I am safe now. You know what I mean." She reached for his hand, her fingers warm despite everything. "Ethan, women have been giving birth since the beginning of time. I will be fine." But they both knew that was not entirely true. Women died in childbirth, frequently, especially on the frontier far from hospitals, from surgeons, from anything beyond a country doctor's limited tools and knowledge. The maternal mortality rate was 1 in 100 at best, higher in places like Montana, and Claire's pregnancy had been difficult from the start. High blood pressure, early labor scares, exhaustion that went beyond normal tiredness. Doc Henderson pulled Ethan aside one afternoon while Claire napped. "I need to be honest with you," the doctor said. "This is going to be hard, harder than most births I have attended." "Why?" "Her blood pressure is still elevated, the baby is large, and she is exhausted before labor has even begun." "What are you saying?" Doc Henderson met his eyes. "I am saying you need to prepare yourself for difficult choices. If complications arise, if I cannot save them both, I will need to know your wishes." Ethan felt the world tilt. What kind of complications? Hemorrhage, obstructed labor, cord prolapse, A dozen other things that can go wrong. The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. I will do everything I can, but you need to understand that sometimes, despite our best efforts, we cannot save everyone. Then save Claire. The words came out before Ethan had time to think. But once spoken, he knew they were true. If it comes to choosing, he said quietly, save my wife. Doc Henderson nodded slowly. I will do my best for both, but I will remember your wishes. Ethan told no one about that conversation, especially not Claire. She would have argued, would have insisted he save the baby. But Ethan had lost too many people already. His parents, his brother. He could not lose Claire too. He would not survive it. The days passed with agonizing slowness. Claire grew more uncomfortable. Her feet swelled. Her back ached constantly. She could barely eat, the baby pressing against her stomach, leaving no room for food. But she bore it with the same quiet strength she had shown since arriving in Montana. She did not complain, did not weep, just endured day after day, waiting for the moment that would change everything. September 7th dawned clear and cold. Frost touched the grass. The mountains stood sharp against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Ethan woke at 4 in the morning to find Claire sitting on the edge of the bed, one hand pressed to her belly. "It is time," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that came from pushing down terror with sheer force of will. Ethan was dressed and out the door in seconds, running to the barn. Doc Henderson emerged from the tack room, already pulling on his coat. "How far apart are the contractions?" "I do not know. She just told me." They hurried back to the cabin. Inside, Claire stood by the window, breathing slowly through what was clearly a contraction. When it passed, she turned to them. "About 10 minutes apart," she said. "They started an hour ago. I wanted to be sure before I woke you." Doc Henderson shook his head with something like admiration. "Most women would have been screaming by now. Let me examine you." Ethan paced the main room while the doctor checked Claire in the bedroom. Every sound made him flinch, every gasp, every creak of the bed. When Doc Henderson emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "She is dilated about 4 fingers. We have time yet. This could take hours, maybe all day." "Is she in pain?" "Some, but she is managing it well." He paused. "I sent word to town yesterday. Your aunt is coming, Claire. She should arrive by mid-morning." Claire appeared in the doorway, holding the frame for support. "You sent for Beatrice?" "I thought you might want her here. She has experience with childbirth, and frankly, I could use another pair of hands." Tears filled Claire's eyes. "Thank you." The morning passed in a strange, suspended state. Claire walked the cabin, stopping when contractions came breathing through them with fierce concentration. Ethan stayed close, offering his arm for support, bringing water, feeling utterly useless. Beatrice arrived at 9, climbing down from the wagon with a basket of supplies. She took one look at Claire and went straight to her, embracing her niece carefully. "I am here," she said simply. "I am not leaving." The contractions grew closer, stronger. By noon they came every 5 minutes. By 2 in the afternoon, every 3. Claire's face grew pale, drawn. Sweat soaked her hair despite the cool day. Doc Henderson examined her again. When he emerged from the bedroom, his expression had changed. The cautious optimism was gone. "What is wrong?" Ethan demanded. "The baby has dropped into position, but labor is not progressing as it should. She has been at this for 10 hours and is still not fully dilated. What does that mean? It means we may have a long night ahead." By evening, Claire's pain had intensified to the point where she could no longer walk. She lay on the bed, gripping the sheets, breathing in short gasps. Beatrice bathed her face with cool cloths. Ethan held her hand, feeling the bones grind together when contractions hit. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." "Not your fault," Claire managed. "Takes 2 to make a baby." She tried to smile, but another contraction took her, and she arched, crying out despite her determination to stay silent. Hour 12, hour 14, hour 16. Night fell. Lamps were lit. the cabin filled with shadows and the sounds of Claire's labored breathing. Doc Henderson grew increasingly concerned. He examined her again at hour 18. "She is fully dilated now," he announced, "but the baby is not descending. Something is blocking it." "What?" "I cannot tell without going in. Claire, on the next contraction, I need you to push. Push as hard as you can." Claire gathered herself. When the contraction came, she bore down with everything she had left. Her face turned red. The cords in her neck stood out. She pushed until she could not breathe. Nothing happened. "Again," Doc said. "Harder." Another contraction. Another push. Still nothing. Doc Henderson's hands went to work examining internally. His face grew grim. "Shoulder dystocia," he said quietly. "The baby's shoulder is caught behind the pubic bone. This is very dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Ethan asked. "If we cannot free the shoulder, the baby will suffocate. And if we push too hard, Claire could tear badly enough to bleed to death." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "What do we do?" Beatrice asked. "I try to manipulate the baby into position, manually. It will be painful." He looked at Claire. "I am going to hurt you. I am sorry. But I have to try." Claire nodded, too exhausted to speak. What followed was the worst hour of Ethan's life. Doc Henderson worked with his hands inside Claire's body, trying to shift the baby to rotate it to free the trapped shoulder. Claire screamed. She could not help it. The pain was beyond anything she had ever experienced. Ethan held her, whispered to her, felt his own tears falling on her face. "I am here. I am here. You can do this." But he was not sure she could. He was not sure anyone could endure this. At hour 20, Doc Henderson stepped back, his face ashen. "I need to speak with Mr. Brooks. Alone." In the main room, away from Claire's hearing, the doctor delivered his verdict. "I cannot free the shoulder this way. I have two options left. I can attempt to use forceps to pull the baby out, or I can perform a cesarean section. Which is safer?" "Neither. Forceps can injure the baby, damage Claire internally, cause catastrophic bleeding. A cesarean in these conditions is almost certainly fatal for the mother. We have no anesthesia adequate for surgery, no way to control infection afterward." "Then what do you recommend?" "I try the forceps. I pray they work. And if they do not work, if Claire's bleeding becomes uncontrollable, you need to prepare yourself." "For what?" Doc Henderson's eyes were full of sorrow. "For the possibility that I can only save one of them. And you need to tell me now, before we reach that point, who to save." The choice Ethan had made weeks ago came back to him. Save Claire. But now, faced with the reality of it, he found the words would not come. This was his child. His daughter, Doc had said earlier, based on the position. His daughter who fought to be born. Could he really sentence her to death before she had drawn a single breath? But Claire, his wife, his partner, the woman who had saved him in more ways than he could count. How could he let her die? "I cannot make this choice," he said. "You may have to." "Then save Claire." The words tore out of him. "If you can only save one, save my wife." Doc Henderson gripped his shoulder. "I will do everything I can for both. But I needed to know." He returned to the bedroom. Ethan followed, unable to stay away, even though every instinct told him to run, to not watch what was about to happen. Doc Henderson had laid out the forceps. They looked like instruments of torture, long metal tongs designed to grip a baby's head and pull. "Claire," the doctor said gently, "I am going to use forceps. It is our best chance. Do you understand?" Claire nodded weakly. She was beyond words now, beyond anything except survival. "On the next contraction, I need the biggest push of your life. Everything you have left. Can you do that?" Another nod. Beatrice moved to support Claire's back. Ethan held her hand. Doc Henderson positioned the forceps with careful precision. The contraction built. Claire's whole body tensed. "Now!" Doc shouted. "Push!" Claire pushed. Doc pulled. The room filled with sound. Claire screaming. Beatrice praying. Ethan's heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. The baby's head appeared, then stopped. Again, Doc commanded. One more. Another contraction. Another push. Ethan saw Claire's face go gray. Saw blood, too much blood, staining the sheets. Saw Doc Henderson's hands moving frantically. Then impossibly, the baby's shoulders slipped free. The rest of the body followed in a rush. For one terrible eternal moment, there was silence. The baby did not cry, did not move, just lay in Doc Henderson's hands, small and still and blue. "No," Ethan heard himself say. "No, please, no." But Doc was already working, clearing the baby's airways, rubbing vigorously with a rough cloth, stimulating, massaging, willing life into the tiny form. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, breathe." Nothing. More rubbing. More stimulation. Still nothing. Then just when Ethan thought his heart would stop from grief, the baby gasped. A weak cough, a stronger one, and then a thin, sharp cry that was the most beautiful sound Ethan had ever heard. "She is alive," Doc Henderson said, wonder in his voice. "She is alive." But the relief lasted only seconds. "I need to deliver the placenta," Doc said urgently. "Beatrice, take the baby. Mr. Brooks, hold pressure here." He guided Ethan's hands to Claire's belly. Blood soaked through immediately. Too much blood. Claire's eyes fluttered. "My baby. Let me see my baby." "In a moment," Doc said, working frantically. "Stay with me, Claire. Stay awake." But her eyes were closing. Her skin was the color of old wax. "Claire." Ethan shook her gently. "Look at me. Stay with me." Her eyes opened briefly. "Tired. I know. But you cannot sleep. Not yet." Doc Henderson worked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, packing pressure stitching. His hands moved with practiced speed, but his face showed the strain. Finally, the bleeding slowed. Stopped. "That is all I can do," he said quietly. "The rest is up to her and God." Beatrice brought the baby cleaned and wrapped in soft cloth. She placed the tiny bundle in Claire's arms. Claire looked down at the small face, the dark hair, the eyes that opened briefly to show a flash of blue. "She is perfect," Claire whispered. "You did it," Ethan said, tears streaming down his face. "You both did it." But Claire was fading. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow. "Claire, stay awake," Ethan begged. "Let me sleep, just for a moment." "No. Look at our daughter. She needs you." But Claire's eyes closed. The baby slipped from her weak grasp. Beatrice caught her quickly. "Doc," Ethan said desperately. "Her pulse is weak. She has lost too much blood. All we can do now is wait." Ethan climbed onto the bed beside Claire, careful of her injuries, and gathered her into his arms. He held her through the night, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, terrified that each one would be the last. The baby slept in a makeshift cradle by the fire, tended by Beatrice. Ethan barely looked at her, could not look at her, because if Claire died, he did not know if he could bear to see the child who had cost him his wife. Dawn came. Claire still breathed. Weak, shallow, but alive. Day 2. Her breathing did not improve. Fever started. Doc Henderson's face grew graver. "Infection," he said. "Puerperal fever. It kills more women than the birth itself. What can you do? Keep her cool. Force liquids. Pray." Day 3. The fever peaked. Claire thrashed in delirium, calling out names. Her father, Catherine. People Ethan did not know. Once she screamed about Edmund begging someone not to hurt her. Ethan bathed her with cool water, held her down when the fever made her violent, forced broth between her lips when she was calm enough to swallow. The baby cried often, hungry, uncomfortable, needing her mother. Beatrice found a wet nurse in town, a young woman who had recently lost her own infant. She came to the ranch and fed the baby while Claire lay dying in the next room. Day 4. Day 5. The fever would not break. Ethan stopped sleeping, stopped eating. His whole world narrowed to the woman in his arms and the rise and fall of her chest. "Do not leave me," he whispered. "Please, I cannot do this without you." On the morning of the 6th day, just before dawn, the fever broke. Claire's skin cooled. Her breathing deepened. Her eyes opened clear for the first time in days. "Ethan," I am here. The baby. She is fine, perfect, healthy. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks. I want to see her. Beatrice brought the baby. Claire held her with trembling arms, looking down at the small face with an expression of absolute wonder. Hello, little one, she whispered. I am your mother, and I am sorry I was not there for you these past days. You were fighting to live, Ethan said, so you could be here for her now. Claire looked at him. I heard you. When I was in the fever, I heard you telling me to stay, to fight. That is why I came back. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Gentle, reverent, grateful beyond words. Over the next 2 weeks, Claire slowly recovered. She was weak, needed help with everything, but she grew stronger each day. She began nursing the baby, though it exhausted her. Doc Henderson visited daily, pleased with her progress. The baby thrived. She ate well, slept well, cried with healthy lungs when hungry or wet. They named her Grace because she was grace incarnate, the grace that allowed them all to survive. In late September, a letter arrived from Boston. Beatrice opened it, read quickly, then handed it to Claire. Catherine's mother had written. The locket, combined with the evidence Beatrice had gathered, had been enough. Edmund Ashworth had been arrested, tried and convicted of Catherine Miller's murder. Additional charges of fraud and conspiracy had been added. He was sentenced to hang. The execution was scheduled for January of 1879. It is over, Claire said, reading the letter again as if to make sure the words were real. He can never hurt anyone again. Catherine has justice, Beatrice added quietly. Because of you. Claire folded the letter carefully. No, because of us. All of us. More news came in October. Thomas Garrett had been convicted of attempted kidnapping, cattle rustling, and fraud. His ranch was seized by the territorial government to be auctioned to pay his legal debts and restitution. Do you want to bid on it? Claire asked Ethan. He considered. Garrett's 1,200 acres bordered their land. Combined, they would have a substantial spread, enough to support future generations. Would you mind? He asked. Why would I mind? It is good land, and it would be poetic justice for us to have it. At the auction in November, Ethan bid $2,500. It was everything they had saved, every penny. But when the gavel fell, the Brooks Ranch expanded from 300 acres to 1,500. That night, holding Grace while Claire rested, Ethan looked around the cabin and felt something he had not felt in years: hope. Winter came early that year. By December, snow lay thick across the land. But the cabin was warm, the barn was full, the cattle were healthy, and inside a baby cooed, and Claire smiled, and Ethan felt for the first time since Connor died that life might be worth living after all. Spring arrived in March of 1879. The snow melted, the creek ran high, grass pushed up through the cold ground impossibly green. Grace was 6 months old now, fat and happy with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She laughed at everything, the horses, the dogs, the sunlight through the window. Claire had recovered fully. She was thinner than before, would always carry scars from the birth, but she was strong again. She worked the ranch with Grace strapped to her back, the baby content to watch everything from her high perch. Neighbors shook their heads in wonder. A woman working a ranch with a baby on her back. It was unheard of, unseemly. Claire ignored them. Beatrice had decided to stay in Montana. She opened a dressmaking shop in Birch Creek using skills learned in Boston. It was modest work, but honest, and it kept her close to the only family she had left. She visited the ranch every Sunday, bringing small gifts for Grace, dresses she had sewn, toys carved by the blacksmith, once a silver rattle that had been Claire's as a baby. I should have given this to you years ago, Beatrice said. Your father would have wanted it. Claire took the rattle with trembling hands. Thank you, for everything, for coming here, for fighting for me. I should have fought sooner, but I am fighting now. That has to count for something. It does. Dawn the foal, born the same winter Claire arrived, was now a yearling. Strong, sleek, beautiful. Claire had trained her with patient care, and the young horse responded with trust and eagerness. "This horse is Grace's," Claire announced one day. "When she is old enough to ride, Dawn will be hers." Ethan smiled at the symmetry. Both born in crisis, both survivors, both proof that new life could come from hardship. The years passed. Grace grew from infant to toddler to child. The ranch prospered. Ethan hired good men, built new corrals, expanded the herd. The Brooks brand became known for quality cattle and honest dealing. In 1885, when Grace was 6 years old, she rode Dawn for the first time. Ethan walked beside her, one hand on the bridle, ready to catch her if she fell. But she did not fall. She sat the horse like she had been born to it, laughing with pure joy. Claire watched from the porch, one hand shading her eyes against the sun. "She is ours," Ethan said that night. "Every stubborn, fearless inch of her. Thank God for that." In 1895, Grace was 16, beautiful, confident, skilled in every aspect of ranch work. Young men came calling, drawn by her looks and her father's land. Ethan was protective but tried to be fair. "She needs to choose for herself," Claire reminded him. "Like I chose you." "I know, but that does not mean I have to like it." Grace chose well. A young rancher named Daniel Hartley, good family, hard worker, kind eyes. They married in the spring of 1896. Ethan gave them a section of the Brooks land as a wedding gift, 160 acres, enough to start their own legacy. "You are still keeping the rest for our children," Grace said, only half joking. "Your children," Ethan corrected. "Your mother and I are too old for more babies." In 1903, Grace gave birth to her first child, a daughter healthy and loud and perfect. They named her Sarah after Ethan's mother. In 1910, her second child arrived, a son this time. "We are naming him Samuel," Grace announced. "After no one in particular. We just like the name." But when Ethan held his grandson for the first time, he thought of Connor, of the brother who never got to have children of his own, and he whispered a silent prayer that this boy would never have to face the things Connor faced, would never carry that kind of darkness. The fire crackled low in the hearth. The December night pressed against the windows of the cabin. In 1919, in the ranch house that had been expanded 3 times but still held the original structure at its core, Ethan Brooks finished his story. "And that is how your mother was born," he said to Samuel. "How your grandmother nearly died bringing her into the world. How we built this ranch from 300 acres to 1,500. How we survived everything that tried to break us." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "You chose to save grandmother instead of the baby." "I did. But they both lived." "They did. Doc Henderson was better than even he knew, and your grandmother was stronger than any of us imagined. Were you afraid?" "Terrified. Every day. Fear does not go away just because you want it to. You learn to live with it, to work through it, to make choices despite it." Samuel nodded slowly. "And now this ranch will be mine. One day, not for a long time yet, God willing. But yes, 1,500 acres, good land, good water, good cattle, everything your great-grandfather started, everything your grandmother and I built. That is a lot to live up to." Ethan leaned forward, his old eyes sharp. "Do not think of it as living up to us. Think of it as building on what we started, adding your own chapter to the story." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Samuel, listen to me. This ranch will test you. Life will test you. You will lose people you love. You will face choices with no good options. You will be afraid and alone and certain you cannot go on. What do I do when that happens? You remember what your grandmother and I learned. You do not face hard things alone. You find someone to stand beside you, someone who will run into blizzards to save you, someone who will hold your hand through the darkest nights. Like you and grandmother. Like us. But your own version. Your own story." Ethan reached out and gripped the boy's shoulder. "And when you have that person, you be the same for them. You run into blizzards. You hold on through dark nights. You choose them every single day, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard." Samuel's eyes were bright. "I will. I know you will, because you are a Brooks. And Brooks men do not run from hard things. We face them, we endure them, we survive them, and then we pass on what we learn to the next generation." The door opened. Claire entered, moving slower than she once had, but still graceful. She was 67 now, silver-haired and lined, but her green eyes still held fire. "Are you filling the boy's head with stories again?" she asked. "Just telling him how things were?" "How you remember them, you mean?" She smiled. "Though I suppose your version is close enough to the truth." She sat down beside Ethan, taking his hand. The gesture was automatic, unconscious. 41 years of marriage made such things as natural as breathing. "Did you tell him the most important part?" she asked. "What part is that?" "That we were lucky. Not just strong, not just brave. Lucky. So many things could have gone wrong, should have gone wrong, but somehow they did not. I prefer to think of it as providence. Providence, luck, fate. Call it what you want. The point is we are here, all of us, against considerable odds." She looked at Samuel. "When this ranch is yours, remember that. Remember how close we came to losing it all, how many times. Let that make you grateful. Let it make you kind, because you never know what someone else has survived to be standing in front of you." "I will remember," Samuel promised. Ethan stood, joints protesting, and walked to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. The moon had risen bright and full, turning the landscape silver. The barn stood dark against the white. The corrals were empty, the horses safe inside for the night. 1,500 acres, 3 generations, a legacy built on love and courage and the simple refusal to give up. "You know," he said quietly, "I ordered a mail-order bride because I needed help with the ranch. I expected someone plain, practical, forgettable. Instead, I got your grandmother, a woman who saved my horses, saved my life, and saved my soul." Claire joined him at the window. "And I came here running from death. Instead, I found life. Not easy life, not perfect life, but real life. Honest life, worth living." They stood together, looking out at the land they had built their lives on, the land that would pass to their daughter, then to their grandson, then to whoever came next, generation after generation carrying forward the lessons learned in hardship. "Tell me something," Claire said. "If you could go back to that day at the station knowing everything that would happen, would you still have sent for me?" Ethan turned to face her. "Every time, every version, in every life, I would always choose you. Even knowing the pain, the fear, how close we came to losing everything. Especially knowing that, because the depth of the pain shows the height of the joy, and I would rather have 1 real year with you than 100 safe, comfortable, lonely years without you." Claire's eyes filled with tears. After 41 years, he could still make her cry. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." Samuel watched them, these old people who had once been young and desperate and brave, who had fought death and won, who had taken broken pieces and built something beautiful. "I understand now," he said. Ethan turned to him. "What do you understand? Why you wanted to tell me the whole story, not just the happy parts, all of it, the fear and the blood and the choices with no good options. Why is that?" "Because anyone can inherit land. But to really be worthy of it, you need to understand what it cost, what people gave up, what they survived. That makes you responsible for it, makes you want to protect it, to add to it, to pass it on better than you found it." Ethan smiled a smile that reached his eyes and made him look for a moment young again. "You are going to be just fine, boy. Just fine." Later, after Samuel had gone to bed and the cabin was quiet, Ethan and Claire sat together by the dying fire. They did not speak, did not need to. After so many years, silence was its own language. Outside, the Montana night sang its ancient song, the wind in the pines, the creek under its winter ice, the mountains standing eternal watch over the valley. Inside, 2 old people held hands and remembered. The stage station where everything began, the barn where willow foaled, the blizzard that nearly killed them, the longest night when Grace was born, all the moments of terror and triumph that had woven their lives together. "No regrets?" Claire asked eventually. "Only one." "What is that?" "That I cannot live it all again." She laughed softly. "Once was enough for me. Any more and I do not think my heart could take it." "Your heart is the strongest thing I know." "Only because yours kept it beating all those times it wanted to stop." They sat until the fire died to embers, until the cold crept in and drove them to bed, until they lay together in the darkness, listening to each other breathe, grateful for one more day, one more night, one more chance to wake up together. In the morning, Samuel would ride out with Ethan to check the cattle. Claire would make breakfast, the kitchen filling with the smell of coffee and bacon and fresh bread. The ranch would wake to another day of work and life and continuing on. But for now, in the quiet hours before dawn, the old rancher and his wife from Boston slept peacefully. Their story told, their legacy secured, their love after 41 years and countless trials still burning bright. Some things Ethan thought as sleep took him are worth every moment of fear, every drop of blood, every impossible choice. Love was worth it, family was worth it, legacy was worth it. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. The story of how two broken people found each other across a continent, how they chose each other despite the fear, how they built something beautiful on hard ground, how they survived everything the world threw at them and came out stronger on the other side. That was the legacy, not the land, not the cattle, not even the ranch itself. The legacy was the love, the courage, the wisdom to know that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. And that legacy would endure long after the last Brooks had worked this land, long after the ranch itself had passed into memory, long after the names were forgotten and the stories faded. Because some truths are eternal. And the truth that love conquers all, that courage matters, that choosing to stand beside someone through darkness is the bravest choice any person can make, that truth would echo through time itself. In the Montana morning, with frost on the grass and smoke rising from the chimney, and 3 generations under one roof, the legacy continued. And that was enough. That was everything.